which has been captured by the BJP and RSS. We are fighting, his words, the Indian state. Now, the BJP has launched into Rahul Gandhi saying, is he waging war against the Indian state, the Indian people? And if it is so, using his words, isn't that anti-national Maoist ideology? Isn't that the real charge of treason which he's accusing Mr. Bhagwat and the RSS of? And this, of course, has led to a huge political face-off between the BJP and the Congress, and the rest of the opposition chiming in as well. But first, the story of how something that Rahul Gandhi said, which no one thinks it's inadvertent or that it was a slip of the tongue, but even if it were, can someone say that he's waging war against the Indian state, least of all someone who is in a constitutional position as leader of the opposition?
भारत का स्व मर जाए, भारत का स्व अपनी गर्दन ऊंची न कर सके, इसलिए तो मंदिरों के विध्वंस हो गए। वो देवी देवता, उनकी पूजा, ये स्व नहीं था वो, लेकिन उनके रूप में जो आदर्श सामने आती है, जीवन की जो मूल्य सामने आते हैं, वो भारतीय है। भारत उसके लिए जाना जाता है। भारत की संविधान की प्रस्तावना में उसका स्पष्ट उल्लेख है सारी बातें।
If you believe that we are fighting a political organization called the BJP, that we are fighting a political organization called the RSS, you have not understood what is going on. The BJP and the RSS have captured every single institution of our country. We are now fighting the BJP, the RSS, and the Indian state itself.
Now, here's where the difficulty is in trying to defend what Mr. Gandhi has said, because the Indian state is one thing, the Indian government is completely different. If Mr. Gandhi ended that sentence by saying, we are fighting the BJP, the RSS, and the Indian government, it would have been kosher, because that's his job as leader of the opposition. One expects him to take on the government. But he used the word Indian state. So what's the difference between the Indian state and the Indian government? The Indian state encompasses the entire political entity of India. It includes the territory, the population, the various branches of government, and the idea of a sovereign state. So the territory, which is the geographical land area of India, the boundaries of India, Kashmir in the north, Kanyakumari in the south, 28 different states and 8 union territories spanning 3.2 million square kilometers. That is the Indian state. Not just that, it also refers to the population, the citizens of India who are living within these territories from Kashmir to Kanyakumari in this 3.2 million square kilometers, which includes every one of the 1.3 billion Indian citizens. They are all construed as part of the Indian state. The government happens to be one part of the Indian state, and the government is again very clear. The institutions, the structures which govern the state, it includes the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Those three constitute the government, and the government is just one part of the larger entity called the Indian state. And the most important thing is sovereignty and territorial integrity. It applies to India as it applies to almost 200 sovereign independent countries around the world, which is the authority and the power for a sovereign nation to govern itself as decided by its people without any external interference. And that sovereignty and territorial integrity is quasi non-negotiable in the case of any sovereign nation. That is the Indian state. The Indian government, on the other hand, refers specifically to the system of governance that operates within the Indian state. And as any civic student would tell you, it includes three branches: the executive, which is led by the Prime Minister and represented by the Council of Ministers. The job of the government, the responsibility of the government, is to implement laws, carry out welfare schemes, and of course, manage the day-to-day affairs of the state. And to keep a check on the executive, you have the legislature, in this case, the Indian Parliament. The Parliament, of course, comprises of the two houses, the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house, the house where representatives are elected directly by the people of India, and then you have the elder house, the Rajya Sabha, the upper house, which is the house of the elders or the house of the states, where there is proportional representation from each of the states, as well as the lower house. So these two are the legislative branch whose job it is to make laws for the country. Rahul Gandhi, as leader of the opposition, occupies a constitutional position. He represents the legislative branch of the Indian state. And finally, there is the judiciary, which includes the Supreme Court, the High Courts, the various lower courts, whose responsibility is to interpret the laws and make sure that every law that is passed by the legislature stands the scrutiny of the Constitution. And also, of course, it is the branch of government that ordinary Indians knock on for administration of justice. Which is why in India, it's very clear the head of the state is President Draupadi Murmu. She is the supreme commander of the armed forces, whereas the head of the government is Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which is why in diplomatic parlance, there's a very different visit if it's done by a head of state, and it's a very different visit if it is done by a head of government. Now, what was Rahul Gandhi's intention? Was it inadvertent that he said that we are fighting not just BJP and RSS, we are fighting the Indian state itself? Or was there something more sinister at play? Rohan Gupta is spokesperson of the BJP. He's joining us. Lavanya Ballal, spokesperson of the Congress, is also joining us. Lavanya, I've just given out that primer on why Mr. Gandhi was wrong. If at all, his choice of words was not inadvertent, because you can't be fighting the Indian state. That is exactly what he has accused Mr. Bhagwat of, treason. If you're fighting the Indian state, that is sedition, that is treason. So, how are you going to defend Mr. Gandhi's words?
Good evening, Zaka. We are, like Rahul Gandhi ji says, we are fighting the Indian state. It is not just the BJP and the RSS. We are fighting multiple institutions that have been weakened or that have been compromised by the BJP. We have seen that happening often. For example, the institution of ED. We have seen how many raids have happened against the ministers or the leaders of opposition parties, but no leaders of the BJP have raids against them. The minute these people, the so-called accused leaders join the BJP, voila, they're all clean overnight. So we have seen how compromised every institution has become today because of the BJP and RSS. And yes, when he talks about Mohan Bhagwat's treason, he's absolutely right. How can Mohan Bhagwat say we got independence only after we built the temple? Yes, of course, it's a great moment of joy for all Indians when we built the temple, but it's a disservice to the entire, set of people, millions of people who sacrificed their entire lives to bring independence to this nation and to the great, work of Dr. Ambedkar and our constitution and all of that. I mean, I just don't understand how can somebody be so disrespectful towards the contribution of the founding fathers of this nation, not just the Gupta, big names. So the millions of unknown names have, sacrificed their lives.
The first part of what Rahul Gandhi said was, how can Mr. Bhagwat say that India truly got its independence only after the building of the Ram Mandir? That's a disservice to the freedom movement, the freedom fighters, the framers of the constitution, the founding fathers of this country. He says in any other country, if Mr. Bhagwat had said the same thing, he would have been arrested, he would have been in jail, and he would have been tried for treason. How do you respond?
See, Zaka, first of all, it is very difficult for Congress spokespersons to defend something which is undefendable. You cannot justify the statement of their leader of opposition where he clearly says that you are fighting against Indian states. How can he say that? This is not the first time. This mindset we have seen in past also, where he had gone abroad and spoken against the country. People will not appreciate this. Definitely you have right to fight Indian government. Definitely you can differ with BJP government, criticize their policies, criticize their decisions. But in that process, if you start fighting against the country will not forgive you. And that is why the situation of the party is what if they are in current situation. Their so-called Indi Gathbandhan is totally now disappeared. Why? Because people of the country know that this Gathbandhan was formed which was opportunistic. They can give the name, but they cannot take the value of that the name. That is the situation of Indi Gathbandhan. You see Delhi how they are fighting separately. So mindset of the party is quite visible from the statement of the leader that they are fighting Indian states. If you fight with the people of India, obviously that's why you are fighting Indians.
What about what Mr. Bhagwat said? How are you defending that?
He gave a perspective. He said that we have been always attacked by people outside India, and the true independence, that is his perspective. You can definitely criticize his statement, but can you give answer to what Mr. Gandhi said? There is no, you cannot defend that. You cannot justify that you are fighting against Indian states. You cannot. How can you say that? The whole country, 140 crore people are watching you, leader of opposition, and he says that you are fighting Indian states. How can you tolerate that? And this is not the first time. In past also
Lavanya
you've seen
Ballal,
that.
the problem is this. When you say Indian state, it's not just Mr. Modi or the government of the day. The Indian state includes the entire territory of India. It includes the entire people of India. The people who are fighting the Indian state are Naxals and terrorists. Surely the leader of the opposition should know that.
Yes, we can misconstrue his statements and apply it as we want to, or we can, change his statements. But I would like to remind everybody,
This is what he has spoken.
Rahul Gandhi has walked the talk. He's never abandoned principles that he believed in. He's never said one thing to one day and he's never abandoned it the next day to talk something else. He stood by his words. And I would like to remind everybody, what Mr. Mohan Bhagwat said today, the BJP does not have a defense because RSS mostly drives the BJP. The Prime Minister should have come out and said, we do not agree with this statement. In any functional democracy today, Zaka, the Prime Minister would have condemned the statements made by Mohan Bhagwat. He may be a very integral part of BJP, but why isn't the Prime Minister or any of the ministers from the BJP reacting to it? Why is it that they are condoning his statement silently?
No. Their contention is that what Mr. Bhagwat said was Bharat ka swa, which is the self got awakened with the construction of the Ram Mandir.
Well, they can say that, but he clearly meant what he said, isn't it? We got freedom after building the temple is what he clearly said. If we should not interpret it in the way he said it, then I think the BJP should stop reading too much into Mr. Rahul Gandhi's statements. Yes, we are fighting against the state. We are not. There is a huge bunch of voters with the Congress. There's a huge bunch of voters with the India bloc. I would like to remind the BJP spokesperson that our Gathbandhan was for the Lok Sabha elections. That's all.
No.
And we have fought against a communist party in Kerala and multiple other parties where we had a Gathbandhan with, and we will continue to do that.
Anyway, I don't want to get diverted by the whole India Alliance unraveling story, but let me go back to Rohan Gupta. Rohan Gupta, the point is that you can quibble with Mr. Gandhi for the choice of words. Maybe instead of Indian state, he should have said Indian government. But fact is, the Congress and the opposition are saying the exact same thing, that every institution, Election Commission, ED, IT, CBI, every institution has been captured by the government of the day and by the supporters of the government of the day. And therefore, what they are taking on, which is what Mr. Gandhi said, is not just a political organization like the BJP or a political entity like the RSS. They are taking on institutions.
Zaka, even answering that, assuming that whatever words he has used is not meaning that, you tell me the election commission, right? You are winning in Jharkhand. There you are not, the election commission is not captured by government. You are winning in Jammu Kashmir. There it is not captured. Why selectivism? In Maharashtra, the election commission declared that after elections, out of 280 seats, every seat they selected 5 booths where EVM and the VVPAT slips, they were matched. And not even a single vote difference was found. And these booths were selected by the opposition party candidates who lost the election. Even after that, you question our election commission. Do you feel that people of country will appreciate that? No. That is the problem. The selective approach of opposition party, wherever something happens good for them, satyameva jayate, लोकतंत्र की जीत हो गई. अगर कुछ गलत हो गया तो बीजेपी ने कर दिया. People will not trust you that. I know Zakat is not about Indi Gathbandhan, but since my friend referred to Indi Gathbandhan, let me tell you, do you feel that if you are not fighting elections in alliance, the issues will change? The same Aam Aadmi Party, with him they were canvassing it with the people of Delhi before 6 months. Now they are fighting each other. People will hope that Delhi will take that. No, the issues are not different. Now they are saying that they are corrupt. So this is the difference of ideology, Zaka. My main point is, this is the party where what they speak and what they approach or follow is totally different.
It's for the people of Delhi to decide whether they look at the India alliance as an unnatural alliance, a non-ideological alliance, or merely a political alliance, or is it an alliance with the sole aim of booting the BJP out of office. People of Delhi will speak in less than a month's time. Thank you very much for the meanwhile, Rohan Gupta and Lavanya Ballal, for joining us. I want to move on to the second part of Brass Tacks. It's a big boost to India's maritime power. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today dedicated 3 frontline naval vessels, the INS Surat, the INS Nilgiri and the INS Vakshir, to the nation. It was a commissioning ceremony that happened in Mumbai. With the arrival of the INS Vakshir, which is a hunter-killer submarine, the INS Surat, which is a guided missile destroyer, and the INS Nilgiri, which is a stealth frigate, the Indian Navy is poised to strengthen its maritime presence, acting as a deterrent, particularly to adversaries like China and Pakistan. Speaking at the commissioning ceremony, the Prime Minister said that India is emerging as a major maritime power in the world and it is expanding shipbuilding with the help of the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan.
आज भारत पूरे विश्व और खासकर ग्लोबल साउथ में एक भरोसेमंद और जिम्मेदार साथी के रूप में पहचाना जा रहा है। भारत विस्तारवाद नहीं, भारत विकासवाद की भावना से काम करता है। भारत ने हमेशा ओपन, सिक्योर, इंक्लूसिव और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन का समर्थन किया है। लंबी समुद्री यात्राएं, कॉमर्स, नेवल डिफेंस, शिप इंडस्ट्री, इसमें हमारा एक समृद्ध इतिहास रहा है। अपने इतिहास से प्रेरणा लेते हुए आज का भारत दुनिया की एक मेजर मैरीटाइम पावर बन रहा है। गर्व की बात कि ये तीनों फ्रंटलाइन प्लेटफॉर्म्स मेड इन इंडिया है।
All right, let's get you the lowdown on all these three naval vessels. We'll start with the INS Nilgiri, which is named after the Nilgiri Hills in the Western Ghats. It's the lead ship of the Project 17A stealth frigate class. It marks a significant leap forward compared to the previous and the earlier avatar called the Shivalik class frigates. This frigate was designed by the Indian Navy's Warship Design Bureau. It was constructed at the Mazgaon Dock shipyards, which is in Mumbai. Both of these are public sector enterprises. It boasts of advanced features which can enhance the survivability of the frigate. It enhances seakeeping and stealth, which represents the next generation of the indigenous frigates that India is building. Then you have the INS Surat, which of course is named after the port city of Surat in Gujarat. It's the last vessel in the line of the Project 15B stealth destroyer class ships. It is an evolution of the previous stage, the Kolkata class destroyers. With the advanced design and the enhanced capabilities that the Surat has, it will play a key role in strengthening the Indian Navy's surface fleet. It is also equipped with state-of-the-art weapon sensor packages and it boasts of advanced network-centric capabilities. And finally, you have the submarine, which is the INS Vakshir. It's named after a certain sand fish which is seen in the Arabian Sea. It's a deep-sea predator that's seen in the Arabian Sea and in the Indian Ocean. The Vakshir submarine is the sixth and the final submarine under the Scorpene class Project 75. The Scorpene was, of course, a joint venture between India and France. It's a diesel-electric submarine that's designed for multiple roles, including both anti-surface warfare, anti-submarine warfare, and, of course, for intelligence gathering. It features modular construction. It enables future upgrades, whether it is independent propulsion technology, both of which have been developed indigenously here in India as part of the Atmanirbhar mission.
Nilgiri is a revolutionary design with a flush forecastle, signal suppression techniques and a super rapid gun mount with smart ammunition. Surat, with her size and strength, is a floating fortress. And Vakshir, one of the world's most advanced submarines. Together, they embody a credible, cohesive, future-ready, and above all, combat-ready force.
A strong Indian naval presence in the Indian Ocean region is India's top priority given the threat from China. This was outlined by the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh today as well at the commissioning ceremony. Pakistan and China in check is absolutely India's topmost defence need, whether it's on the land frontier or whether it's in the high seas. So how does India's navy compare to the navies of both Pakistan and China? India has 13 active guided missile destroyers. They are versatile surface combatants that are equipped for both offensive as well as defensive roles. China has a substantial number higher. It has 50 such destroyers, and Pakistan has 0 destroyers. The Indian Navy's submarines, which include the INS Chakra, the INS Arihant, the INS Kalvari, Khanderi and Karanch. There are 18 submarines that are in active duty currently. China again has a much higher number with 61 submarines in active duty. Pakistan has half of what India has. It has 8 submarines that are currently in active duty. Smaller, agile warships that are designed for coastal defense and quick strikes. These are called the corvettes. In India, there are 18 corvettes that are in active duty right now. China has much more, in fact 5 times more at 72, and 9 in Pakistan. Again, Pakistan has exactly half the number of corvettes that the Indian Navy has. In terms of frigates, China leads in the number of frigates it has. It has 47. India has 14 of these medium-sized warships. It comes just a notch below the missile destroyers in terms of naval architecture and naval terminology. Pakistan, on the other hand, has 9 such frigates. The Indian Navy collectively has around 67,000 active personnel and 75,000 reserve personnel. That's a total of about 1.3 lakh. It has a total fleet of 293 vessels. Pakistan, on the other hand, has 121. China has a whopping 750. Now, China, of course, has the largest naval fleet in the world, but India is putting up a tough fight to try and match out or try and even out the gap, the difference in terms of the frigates, the destroyers, etc., the corvettes, particularly when it comes to indigenously built vessels. So what is the difference really between a frigate and a destroyer, both of which were commissioned into the Indian Navy today by the Prime Minister? The 2 warships that were commissioned today, INS Surat and INS Nilgiri, the destroyers are much smaller battleships, but they are larger than the frigates. The frigates weigh about 1,500 to 4,000 tons. A destroyer, on the other hand, could weigh as much as 8,000 tons. So it's roughly about 4 times bigger than a destroyer. The frigates are designed to be fast. They've got higher speeds. The destroyers, of course, are slower. They are slightly less nimble-footed, as it were. And, of course, the frigate has greater maneuverability. The usual speed of the frigate is anywhere between 30 knots, that's about 55 kilometers per hour, while the destroyers, on the other hand, are a little slower, between 20 and 30 knots. Modern destroyers peak around 61 kilometers per hour. Usually the frigates have surface-to-air missiles, which are called the SAMs. It also has anti-submarine missiles and, of course, the ASW torpedoes and guns for surface-to-combat, while the destroyers, on the other hand, are equipped with longer-range weapons. The frigates are primarily meant for anti-submarine warfare, whereas the destroyers are equipped with high-resolution radars as well as vertical launch cells, which includes hitting at both choppers as well as aircraft. A frigate can provide short-range air defense, whereas a destroyer can launch anti-ship as well as anti-aircraft missiles. Now, these 3 powerful vessels, the submarine, the frigate and the destroyer, it symbolizes India's push for an Atmanirbhar Navy, or a self-reliant Indian Navy. Now, just in the last 5 to 10 years, India has come a long way when it comes to its Atmanirbhar journey in the defense sector. From being among the top 25 arms exporters in 2019, just 5 years ago, India's targeted defense exports at the end of this year are worth 35,000 crore rupees. India's defense exports have reached an all-time high. It was 686 crores, merely 686 crores in 2013-14, 10 years ago. Today, at the end of 23-24, the calendar year of 23-24, it stands at 21,000 crores. That is an increase of over 30 times of defense exports value over the past decade. The Ministry of Defense has reported an unprecedented 1.27 lakh crores in domestic defense production this past year. The value of defense production has increased by approximately 174%, in the last decade. Let's listen in to what the Defence Minister said at the commissioning ceremony today in Mumbai.
INS सूरत, INS नीलगिरी और INS वागशीर यानी एक डिस्ट्रॉयर, एक फ्रिगेट और एक सबमरीन की एक साथ हो रही हिस्टोरिक कमीशनिंग सिर्फ इंडियन नेवी की ही नहीं बल्कि आपके नेतृत्व में इंडियन ओशन रीजन में भारत की बढ़ती ताकत का भी यह प्रमाण है। इंडियन ओशन रीजन में एक सशक्त इंडियन नेवी की प्रेजेंस हमारे लिए स्वाभाविक रूप से सबसे बड़ी यह प्रायोरिटी हो जाती है। आज हो रही 3 बड़े और मॉडर्न प्लेटफॉर्म्स की कमीशनिंग हमारे लक्ष्य प्राप्ति की दिशा में अत्यंत महत्वपूर्ण एक माइलस्टोन है, परंतु आज के तेजी से बदलते हुए परिवेश में यह और भी महत्वपूर्ण हो गया है। आज हम ये कह सकते हैं कि जो महत्व पूर्व में अटलांटिक ओशन का हुआ करता था, वो महत्व आज शिफ्ट होकर इंडियन ओशन की ओर आ गया है।
Given you the importance of these 3 naval combat vessels, we now get you a sneak peek from inside, in fact on board the INS Nilgiri.
We're on board INS Nilgiri. The ship was commissioned this morning by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In fact, when you look at how this ship has been made, it's the first in its class. It's a frigate class ship. Frigates are the ships which are more compact, they are stealth, and they are in the second line of defense behind destroyers because they're supposed to provide cover to the destroyers. Destroyers are the ship which attack enemies directly. Frigate class are the ship which provide support to them. So if you see, considering this is the first in its class, it's completely a new design. This was made at Mazgaon Shipbuilding Limited, and this very class of ship that you see is trying to depict similarity to destroyer class, and because destroyers are the biggest range of ship. In fact, the whole surface is called the falcon of the ship, which means forecastle of the ship, which means the upper deck of the ship. And in fact, considering that there are turbulence on the sea, there have been lines that have been created wherein the sailors can be hooked to it so that the turbulence can be minimized. Apart from that, when you speak of the kind of missiles that are there in this ship, right behind me is the surface-to-surface missile BrahMos. Apart from that, Barak 8. There are 8 of these that have been put in Nilgiri. That is how frigate class operates. Destroyers have 16 missile each, that is surface-to-surface and surface-to-air. Comes frigates, they have 8 each. That's the kind of similarity that has been portrayed here at INS Nilgiri as well. And behind me are also rocket launchers. So here, when you speak of this, a frigate class usually has the deck, but this very ship will have more stealth mode because all of the missiles, they've been put below on a deck, just below this one level down, which means when they go on sea, the sensors of enemy ships will not be able to detect this. So that's where this ship would get that kind of an edge over other frigate class. This is the upper deck, that's the forecastle of the ship. Behind this would also be a helicopter launch pad, wherein there could be aircrafts which could land on this very ship.
All right, let's move on to the other big political story of the day. 3 weeks to go for the Delhi elections. The Union Home Ministry today has granted permission to the Enforcement Directorate to prosecute former Delhi Chief Minister and Aam Aadmi Party national convener Arvind Kejriwal, along with his then deputy Manish Sisodia. This is in connection with the money laundering case linked to the alleged liquor policy scam. The move comes months after the Supreme Court ruled that the Enforcement Directorate, just like the CBI, has to take prior sanction for the prosecution of public servants, including Chief Minister and Deputy Chief Minister. This is as per the Criminal Procedure Code in money laundering cases. So far, the framing of charges against Kejriwal in this case was pending in the absence of this sanction, which today the Ministry of Home Affairs has given. The approval from the MHA comes a month after the Delhi Lieutenant Governor V.K. Saxena gave his nod to the agency, the Enforcement Directorate, to go ahead and prosecute Mr. Kejriwal. The CBI got the sanction for the same in August of 2024 in what is a parallel investigation in the same case. The ED, of course, is looking at the money laundering angle. The CBI is looking at the alleged criminality angle. Now, this development comes exactly 10 months after Kejriwal was first arrested by the Enforcement Directorate in March of 2024. Subsequently, he was also arrested by the CBI, and then later in September of last year, he was eventually granted bail by the Supreme Court of India. He was, of course, incarcerated for 6 months in jail, and this comes bang in the middle of this election campaign, an election which he has made into a referendum of sorts on his anti-corruption crusader image. He was, of course, released from the Tihar jail in September of 2024. So what does today's decision mean? The sanction to prosecute Mr. Kejriwal, what are the implications of that? And what might the effect be, both for Kejriwal as well as for Manish Sisodia and the Aam Aadmi Party itself? Because remember, the political party that is Aam Aadmi Party has also been made a party in this case, and accused in this case. Number one, with the Home Ministry's sanction, the Enforcement Directorate can move court and ask for framing of charges against Kejriwal and Sisodia. That is a significant development because it indicates, and if a court is convinced that yes, charges can be framed, then what that means is that the court is convinced that prima facie there is enough material that's been placed before it, whether it is in the form of evidence or grounds that the investigating agency has brought forth, which seeks the sanction to prosecute, which means that charges can be framed against the accused individuals. It also clears the path for the prosecution and the trial to begin. The court, while framing its charges against the accused individuals, will also give a date on when the trial can begin. This could lead to a formal indictment, and then, of course, there could be a lengthy legal trial, and that would again mean further legal consequences for Mr. Kejriwal. It also, and because it comes bang in the middle of the election campaign, we've got less than a month to go for the Delhi election, it gives a lot of political cannon fodder and ammunition to the Aam Aadmi Party's rivals, both the BJP and the Congress, ahead of the Delhi polls, who have tried to put the AAP on the mat over these very same corruption allegations. Now, Arvind Kejriwal is facing these grave charges in the alleged liquor scam. According to the charge sheet that was submitted by the Enforcement Directorate before the trial court, Kejriwal, they allege, the ED alleges, is the kingpin and the key conspirator of this scam. They've also named AAP leader Vijay Nair. The ED alleges he acted on behalf of both Mr. Kejriwal and Mr. Sisodia. The charge sheet says that Mr. Kejriwal was in touch with one of the main accused in this scam, Sameer Mahindra, who is one of the biggest private distributors of alcohol in Delhi. Kejriwal asked the accused, Mr. Mahindra, to work with one of the co-accused, Mr. Nair, who is in charge of all communication for the Aam Aadmi Party. The ED's charge sheet alleges that this happened over a video call conversation. The ED is also alleging in the charge sheet that Mr. Kejriwal was part of the plan that was coordinated by Vijay Nair and in coordination with what they call the South Group. Part of the South Group was K. Kavita, the daughter of PRS leader KCR. The charge sheet alleges that Kavita orchestrated the deal with Kejriwal and Manish Sisodia along with some liquor cartels in the South. In exchange for the kickbacks, Kavita had access to policy formulation and the change of the excise policy in Delhi. Part of the conspiracy was also giving wholesale profits of 12% to certain private firms. One of those private firms was previously blacklisted as well, and exceptions were made to give those commissions to these private firms. The ED is alleging in its charge sheet that this conspiracy led to the streaming of illegal funds in the form of kickbacks from wholesalers back to the Aam Aadmi Party. And the charge sheet also alleges that out of those kickbacks of 100 crores, the Aam Aadmi Party even routed 45, almost half of the 100 crore kickback allegedly for the Goa campaign for the election that happened in 2022. Now, in the wake of these charges, what is the road ahead? What really lies ahead for Kejriwal, for Sisodia, and of course, what may this mean materially in the course of the elections? Kejriwal, of course, will face the prosecution as soon as the trial date is set and as soon as the trial begins. The stage currently is where documents are being scrutinized, which means all the evidence that's being produced by the Enforcement Directorate has to be made available to Mr. Kejriwal's lawyers, the defense side. The ED can now go back to the court and say that, look, we've got the sanction to prosecute, kindly frame charges against Mr. Kejriwal. The process, though, will only begin. The court has to be A, convinced about the framing of charges, and B, more importantly, the document screening process has to be complete. The Delhi High Court will then begin a hearing on the legality of the charge sheet, the charges that have been brought forth against Mr. Kejriwal and against Mr. Sisodia, and whether the investigating agency, the Enforcement Directorate in this instance, has material proof which will stand the test of law inside a court of law during the trial proceedings, whether it stands the test of law, which could then potentially lead to the accused persons being pronounced as guilty. But let's listen in to both Mr. Kejriwal and to Mr. Sisodia. Both of them filed their nominations. They're fighting from New Delhi and the Jangpura constituency. They filed their nominations today for the upcoming Delhi elections and spoke specifically to reporters on this sanction to prosecute nod, which has been given by the MHA.
सर आज ही आपका नामांकन है, आज ही गृह मंत्रालय ने ईडी के आपके मनीष के खिलाफ जांच के लिए उसको सैंक्शन दे दिया है।
वो उस तरह से चुनाव लड़ रहे हैं, हम इस तरह से चुनाव लड़ रहे हैं।
आज आपके खिलाफ एक ये भी आया कि एमएचए ने मुकदमा करने की इजाजत दे दी है उस जो आबकारी नीति का मामला चल रहा है आपके और अरविंद केजरीवाल जी के खिलाफ, तो क्या फिर से चुनावों में
इनके सारे कुकर्म इनके ऊपर भारी पड़ते हैं। इन्होंने मुझे जेल में रखा है, इनके ऊपर भारी पड़ेगा। इन्होंने केजरीवाल जी को गाली गलौज किया, केजरीवाल जी के ऊपर गालियां उछाली, वो इनको भारी पड़ेगा। जनता इसका जवाब देगी।
We're just now getting some details from the nomination papers that have been filed by Mr. Kejriwal. He's of course fighting from the New Delhi seat. So we've managed to access his poll affidavit, which details assets that he has presently at 1.73 crores. It is down from the 2020 declaration by a few crores is our understanding. He has also declared that there are 14 pending cases against him, including of course the two cases that have been brought forth in the Liquorgate scam. But Kejriwal is now saying in his affidavit that his assets have come down compared to the election that happened 5 years ago and the affidavit that he filed in 2020. I believe Aman Sharma has more details on this. Aman, so just compare what Mr. Kejriwal has filed now to what his assets declaration was 5 years ago.
Well, Zaka, the affidavit that Mr. Arvind Kejriwal has filed today puts his assets at nearly rupees 1.73 crore. This is slightly down from 2020 when he had declared assets worth rupees 1.87 crores. So though his assets have come down, his spouse Sunita Kejriwal's assets have grown. That is due to the market value of their residential place and the gold she owns that has gone up from about it was earlier in 2020 her wife had assets about 1.57 crores to which has gone up to nearly rupees 2.5 crores. So the couple now is worth almost rupees 4.23 crore, up from rupees 3.4 crore in 2020. But most of it is due to the rise in the residential place they have, the value of that, the current market value and the value of gold they have. So the Aam Aadmi Party could cite this affidavit to say, see, there is no real growth in Mr. Kejriwal's assets despite all the allegations that have been lodged against him. He does not even own a vehicle. But I think the more interesting part which the BJP could pick is that Mr. Kejriwal has declared 14 pending cases against him, including the CBI case in the liquor scam and the ED case in the liquor scam. He has mentioned that no charges have been framed in either of the cases, and proceeding the ED case in fact have been challenged by him. There are also 6 defamation cases, including the one where he had challenged the Prime Minister's degree, where the Gujarat University had contradicting him, and a BJP MP had lodged a defamation case against him in 2022. That has also been mentioned in this particular affidavit. So,
all right, we'll wait and see how this plays out, whether this will have an impact, whether this will become a campaign talking point, and whether the BJP and the Congress raise this, both the assets and of course the criminal cases that are pending against Mr. Kejriwal. Let's now move on to the next segment here on Brass Tacks. Tulip Siddiq, who is Britain's anti-corruption minister, was ousted. The Bangladeshi Prime Minister, the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's niece, Tulip Siddiq, has now resigned, bowing to mounting pressure over her alleged links to her aunt and also subsequent multiple ongoing anti-corruption investigations which have linked her aunt and her name. Now, while the UK investigation by Sir Laurie Magnus found no direct evidence of impropriety on Tulip Siddiq's part, it was the mounting pressure that was being put on the UK government under Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who came under immense pressure, and that drove Tulip Siddiq to eventually put in her papers and resign from the government of Mr. Keir Starmer. Now, the Labour MP has been under the scanner for some time now for using 3 properties in London, all of which are linked to Sheikh Hasina's allies from the time that she was Prime Minister of Bangladesh. One of those properties was given to Tulip Siddiq by a person connected with the now ousted Bangladesh government and the Bangladesh Premier, Sheikh Hasina. However, in 2022, a couple of years earlier, Siddiq had denied on record that this particular property in central London, this apartment, was not given to her as a gift, and she insisted that her parents, her mother happens to be the sister of Sheikh Hasina, had actually bought that apartment for Tulip Siddique. She did not reveal at that time that this was a gift given to her by a close associate of the ousted former Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina. Bangladesh's Anti-Corruption Commission alleges that she was involved in the illegal allocation of land in the diplomatic zone very close to Dhaka, that her mother, sister and brother were allegedly involved in the allocation of this VVIP property in this highly guarded and highly secured zone in the diplomatic enclave in Dhaka. The Labour MP was also named last month in an investigation which claims that her family was involved in brokering a 2013 deal. This was for Bangladesh to procure a Russian-enabled nuclear power plant in a place called Rooppur in Bangladesh, where large sums of money were embezzled. Now, this again came to light last month, and this was really the one case that made her position untenable, because remember, the Russian government and the Russian state agencies were involved in this. And right now, with the prevailing mood in Europe for a Labour minister to be seen as kowtowing with the Russians, made her position increasingly untenable. So amid all this growing scrutiny, Tulip Siddique referred herself to Starmer's ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, while Sir Magnus's investigation said that they had not identified any kind of evidence, certainly no direct evidence, that finds links of impropriety directly between the minister concerned, that is Tulip Siddique, and elements of the former Hasina regime in Bangladesh. It was regrettable that the MP had not been more alert to potential reputational risks of her deep ties with her aunt and elements who were close associates with the previous regime in Dhaka. In her letter to the Prime Minister, the resignation letter, Tulip Siddique has said that she acted and has continued to act with full transparency and on the advice of officials in these matters. Her departure came after Bangladesh's interim government head, Muhammad Yunus, Professor Yunus, condemned the use of these properties that were gifted to her, certainly the one apartment in central London that was quote-unquote gifted to Tulip Siddique. Opposition MPs in the UK have also accused Prime Minister Starmer of appointing his personal friend as an anti-corruption minister, even though she herself was subject to accusations of corruption herself. Now, she has said to avoid any distraction and from becoming a political liability for the government, and she didn't want to put the government at a political spot of bother, she has resigned as the minister there in charge of the economy. Now, speaking of Bangladesh and India, and remember, there has been a fair share of the diplomatic tussle that's been going on ever since Sheikh Hasina was ousted from power last August. On the 23rd of October, Bangladesh recalled its envoy to India. 2 months later, on the 3rd of December, Bangladesh summoned the Indian High Commissioner. On the 12th of January, just earlier this week, Bangladesh's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed deep concern about what it described as unauthorized attempt by the BSF to construct barbed wire fencing along the border between India and Bangladesh. And then, just a couple of days ago, India, in reciprocal action, summoned the Bangladesh Deputy High Commissioner. The recent border clashes were testament to the fact of how the Yunus government has been trying to halt border projects under pressure from radical elements within the interim government and also radical elements from the political spectrum in Bangladesh. So much so, there is now talk that Bangladesh wants to review all the underlying agreements, particularly the land boundary agreement that was arrived at between India and Bangladesh when Mr. Modi and Ms. Sheikh Hasina signed that agreement back in 2015-16. Jamaat Kada, and Jamaat is becoming increasingly influential both in and outside of the interim government headed by Professor Yunus. Jamaat Kada was seen protesting along with the border guards of Bangladesh, trying to aid the flow of more illegal migrants across the border into India. Our reporter traveled to the border, much of which currently is unfenced. Of course, the fencing work is going on a war footing, but there are temporary arrangements which are hardly enough to keep these illegal migrants out. But the BSF in this particular area in Bashir Hat on the border between India and Bangladesh has been trying to thwart these illegal attempts 24/7. This is an exclusive ground report filed by my colleague Kamalika Sengupta.
They have their land beyond the fencing but before the zero line. And the villagers here in Bashir Hat in Indo-Bangladesh border, this type of checking is done to them, and then there is not only this type of checking, you can see that everybody is coming here and registering their name, and they are submitting their Aadhaar card, and there is this biometric also, which is they have everybody's record. The villagers who are here, their biometric record is kept here, and now each and every one will also see that in thumb impression, and this has been checked that whether this is the person whose biometric is recorded there, and then they are keeping their Aadhaar card here, and straight away they will be going on the other side to their property. They will be going to the other side. This other side is they will go via this gate. This gate opens up for them so that they can do their farming activities. कोई
ना इधर कोई गड़बड़ नहीं हो रहा है, कोई गड़बड़ नहीं हो रहा है.
This is the zero line, and just after the zero line is Bangladesh. No untoward incident happens out there. That is what is the motive of BSF, and the villagers are also saying that whenever they require a help, that has been given by the BSF. But obviously so many news is coming on, there is a tension, but they are saying that they are safe till the time the BSF is there. Right now we are standing in Khajori BOP, where in this battalion 33 kilometers land is there, 33 kilometer border is there, out of which approximately 20 kilometers have no fence. It is unfenced. Right now we are standing there where there is no fence, and there has been attempts of infiltration from this region. This Khajuri area, BOP of Vashihar, a major area is not fenced, and that is also a problem for the villagers out there, and we will talk to them and try to find out.
Meanwhile, some international news, and a ceasefire is likely between Israel and Hamas, bringing to an end the 15-month-long war in the Middle East. Negotiators were close to hammering out a final detail of the ceasefire after marathon talks in Qatar. According to both the US and Qatar, both of whom are mediators, Israel and Hamas are at the closest point ever since this war began at signing a ceasefire. The developments come ahead of US President-elect Donald Trump being inaugurated into office next Monday, and he had warned that there would be hell to pay if all hostages were not released before he returns to office.
More than a year after Hamas's deadly assault on Israel and an even deadlier war on Gaza, both warring sides are inching closer to reaching a ceasefire, with mediators making the final push to seal the deal that would also see the release of hostages. The US, Egypt and Qatar have been involved in finalizing a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas since last year and securing the release of hostages captured during Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel. Negotiators met in Qatar hoping to hammer out the final details. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas was right on the brink.
Over the past several weeks, our intensive efforts have brought us to the brink of full and final agreement. On Sunday, the United States, Qatar and Egypt put forward a final proposal. The ball is now in Hamas's court. If Hamas accepts, the deal is ready to be concluded and implemented. I believe we will get a ceasefire. And whether we get there in the remaining days of our administration or after January 20th, I believe the deal will follow closely the terms of the agreement that President Biden put forward last May and our administration rallied the world behind.
Hamas has accepted a draft agreement for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and the release of dozens of hostages. The three-phase plan is based on a framework Biden laid out in June 2024. The first phase would last for 6 weeks and include a full and complete ceasefire withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza and the release of 33 Israeli hostages taken by Hamas, including women, the elderly and the wounded, in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Details of the second phase would have to be negotiated during phase 1. According to the draft agreement, in this phase, Hamas will release the remaining living captives, mainly male soldiers, in exchange for more prisoners and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. Finally, in phase 3, a major reconstruction plan for Gaza would commence, and any final remains of hostages who have been killed would be returned to their families. Hamas has said it will not free the remaining hostages without an end to the war and a complete Israeli withdrawal. In the past too, ceasefire deals have been enforced temporarily to allow limited humanitarian aid in Gaza. However, long-term plans have fallen apart over Hamas demanding Israel's military withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Israel has refused to comply with the demand.
Go Power.
먼저 나왔었습니다. 우리가 믿을 수 있는 그런 권력을 우리가 스스로
대한민국 상황을 많이 알려주십시오.
알거든요. 저기 한번 누구 하나 미끄러지면 줄줄이 미끄러지기인데
더욱 더딘 상황입니다. 소방당국은 관저앞에 상자가 정확히 누구인지는 전해지지 않고 있습니다만 부상자 1명을 소방당을 22일까지
어제 전해졌는데 집회는 지금 본격적인 진입 이전. 얼마나 엄중하게
내가 내란숙의
शेखरं कृपाकरं नारदादियोगी वृन्दवन्दितं दिगम्बरं काशिकापुरादिनाथ कालभैरवं भजे भानुकोटिभास्वरं भवद्दितारकं परं नीलकण्ठमेप्सिदर्थदायकं त्रिलोचनम्।
90 साल की इस महिला को रीवा से यानी मध्य प्रदेश से लेके चले हैं, क्योंकि ये चलने में असमर्थ है और इनको दर्शन कराने के लिए ये यहाँ लेके पहुंचे हैं। और ऐसे में देखा जा सकता है कि इनकी भक्ति क्या है इस महिला की। अम्मा, कहाँ जा रही हो?
गंगा
नहाने जा रही हो? पहली बार आई हो कि पहले भी जा चुकी हो? पहली बार आई हो?
पहली बार आई हो? पहली बार आई।
इस वक्त हम मौजूद हैं कच्छप द्वार में और कच्छप द्वार से ठीक 100 मीटर आगे संगम है और यहाँ पर संगम में आज भी बीते कल की तरह लोग करोड़ों की तादाद में जो है पावन स्नान करने के लिए पहुँच रहे हैं। तो यहाँ पर देखिए, आपको मैं तस्वीरें लगातार दिखा रहा हूँ कि किस तरीके से लगातार श्रद्धालु यहाँ पर पहुँच रहे हैं और महाकुंभ तकरीबन 1.5 महीने तक चलेगा। इसी तरीके से श्रद्धालु जो हैं वो लगातार संगम में आकर पावन की डुबकी लगाते रहेंगे। एक दंपत्ति हैं, कहाँ से आए हैं आप?
सूरत से।
सूरत से?
गुजरात, सूरत से।
और आज पावन स्नान करेंगे आप? कहाँ से आए हैं आप?
हम गोंडा से। गोंडा
से आए हैं जी। आप कहाँ से हैं?
भिंड चंबल।
तो कहाँ से हैं आप?
भाई साहब, मैं भोपाल से आया हूँ, अभी आ ही रहा हूँ। पैदल
इस ठंड में आपके चेहरे पर पसीना
पैदल आ रहा हूँ साहब, स्टेशन से पैदल आते हुए।
पैदल चलने में तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं?
बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है, बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है।
हर जगह पुलिस प्रशासन,
बहुत अच्छा, पुलिस प्रशासन को बहुत अच्छा